I read 4,517 pages across 14 books and 4 comics. I had a fantastic May. So straight away in with the stats. The format: I read 4 paperbacks, 4 hardbacks, 3 audiobooks, 1 ebook, 5 comics and 1 mixed media. For the nationality, I read 7 English authors, 5 American authors, 1 Scottish, 2 French, 1 Nigerian American, 1 Malaysian and 1 Japanese. I read 10 female authors and 8 male authors. For the genre, I read 12 fantasy books, 1 classic, 2 non-fiction, 2 sci-fi and 1 horror. I listened to 67 hours of audiobook, which is a lot lower than I have in previous months. However, I was off work for some time and I do most of my audiobooking at work, so that explains some of that. And my biggest book was A Sky Beyond the Storm at 516 pages, and my oldest book was Great Expectations, originally published in 1861. I have never read comics as part of my monthly reading, so I'm really not sure whether to count these as books, especially because they are from the free comic book day that happened in May, so I assume they might be smaller than regular comics. I really don't know. So I don't know whether to count these as reads. Like, if I do, my current reading is like 80 books for the year, so is it really 76? I don't know. You lot tell me. I need advice. But I'm just going to go through the 5 comics first. Obviously they were interspersed throughout the month, but I'm just going to get them out of the way. And the timestamps are down below, so if you really don't care about comics, you can skip ahead to the books. So this one is Dying Inside by Pete Wentz, Fallout Boy's Pete Wentz, and this is like a little starter to a graphic novel that's coming out. I am intrigued. I didn't think I would be. I was like, oh, it's so emo, it's so like angsty teenage girl, but I'm very curious about the fantasy aspect in this, so I think I might have to get this out from the library when it releases, which is I think September this year. Then a very silly one, that is Investigators Class Action Sneak Peek by John Patrick Green. This one is like spy alligators. I don't think I'll do anything with this again, but it was really fun to read. I really enjoyed it, and I am going to be passing this off, as well as a couple of one of the other ones. I'm going to pass it off to my mum's school. She works in a primary school, so I'm sure the kids will enjoy reading this, and they might then pick up the graphic novels. Witches of Brooklyn by, it doesn't say on the front, I think it's Sarah Escabasse. Does it say on the back? Sophie Escabasse. I was close. This is one that I really liked because it's actually a standalone story rather than just being the beginning part of a bigger graphic novel. It's a standalone story that fits in with the other graphic novels in the series, and it's these girls who are witches in Brooklyn and they are learning how to make potions and things go slightly wrong. This was really fun and really cute and really sweet. I would love to read more from this series at some point in the future, and I am going to give it away to my old school, but just because I think the kids will get so much more out of this than I will, even though I really enjoyed it. One I am definitely keeping, and that is Doctor Who, The 15th Doctor Faces a Fearsome New Threat by Dan Walters. Somehow I've never read a Doctor Who comic before, despite being a Whovian. I also, as of filming right now, haven't seen any of the new series because we were in Sweden when it came out and we just haven't had time to catch up, partly because we also then got the flu. It's been a fun time, but this was really enjoyable. I definitely felt the Doctor as a character coming through, but also it did feel like Ncuti from what I've seen of him in like the Christmas episode and stuff. So this was enjoyable. And this was a huge disappointment. The Cursed Library Prelude by... does it say? It never says. Fine. I was expecting so much fun. No, this was dull, boring. All it is setting it up so that you want to go buy the other books, but I'm not interested enough in the characters. Like, you've told me vaguely what it's about, and you're like, yeah, buy the other books if you want to know anything actually about it, but I don't care enough. You haven't gotten me to care enough about these 2 characters to care about going and buying any of the other books. It's also like quite short. Yeah, I had really high hopes of this because of the really cool cover. It's why I left it till last. It's the last thing I read in May, but no. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this because the cover is so cool. Like, I love this artwork, but I don't like the thing, and it's not appropriate to go to my mum's school, so not sure what's going to happen with that one. But let's dive in to the actual books. First up, we have my Discworld book of the month, and that is Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. This is my first Discworld book that got 5 stars. I can't believe it. I was not expecting it. I thought my first 5-star Discworld would be a death book. this was just so good. I mean, Death was involved, he's always involved because of course he is, he's the star of the show. But this is one of these standalone novels that is more tied in with like pyramids and things like that. Just talking about deities, I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of discussion on religion and he insults and compliments every religion in a very even-handed way. Obviously this is all set in the fantastical world of the Discworld, so none of the religions are real, but they're very clearly based off of real-life religions. And I feel like he does a very good job at insulting them all equally, whilst also pointing out the good parts of them all equally, and having nuanced discussions on that within this humour fantasy series. It really is one of Pratchett's best works. My laptop sounds like it's going to take off. This is fantastic. I highly, highly recommend this. You can read this without having read any of the previous books. It is a standalone and I really do recommend. It looks a little bit big, like it's like just under 400 pages, but it's a mass market and you'll fly through it. This is fantastic. Then I listened to A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. I wasn't expecting to love this. If you saw my review last month, the month before, of book 3, I found it mediocre, unfortunately, and I just wasn't in the world. I didn't really care. This one, I cried. My pillow was wet with tears and I listened and cried. This is fantastic. I ended up giving it a 4.5-star review. I don't want to say too much, obviously, because it is book 4 in a series. We follow a girl who's like a lower race of human being, and there are marshals who are inspired by the ancient Romans, and they are the upper class, and it's about people working together, bringing down an empire. It's really good. I recommend. Then Great Expectations with Olivia Spanner from Olivia's Catastrophe. We buddy read this one together and we finally finished it this month. We had a lot going on while we were reading this. We had weddings, funerals, job changes, everything. It was a big time for both of us, but we did finally finish it, so I only have one book left in this bind-up. I'm very excited to read A Tale of Two Cities. We had feelings about Great Expectations. The ending is atrocious. Both the new ending and the original ending. It's just so bad. Like, obviously I don't want to spoil it, but it really doesn't give any closure. It's written poorly, it feels rushed, and for a lot of this book we didn't really understand why we're following Pip, like what is the point in it. It just seemed aimless for quite a while. We did end up enjoying it. I really did like Miss Havisham's character and I did grow to adore Pip, but it's not my favourite of Dickens novels by a long shot. It is a slower one chapter a day, or doing it by audiobook is definitely the way to go with this, with Great Expectations, because it's definitely not as good as Oliver Twist, which is the other Dickens novel I've read, and Christmas Carol will always be my favourite. So yeah, unfortunately this one was a disappointment. Then I read The Life of Birds by David Attenborough. I loved this. It's a non-fiction by the master of nature documentaries himself, and you can really feel the same tone that he uses when he is doing his documentaries here in his writing. I think this was done really, really well. It's split up into chapters all about the life of these birds, so whether they have flight, how they fly, what they eat, how they find partners, how they raise their young, all of that. And I really enjoyed the illustrations, photographs that were added that are relevant to the various different species that are mentioned. They don't have photos for every species and every example given, but it is for a fair few, and as someone who isn't that great with ornithology and I'm not able to automatically visualise the bird that he's speaking about, being able to go and see if there was a picture and having that visual reference was really, really helpful with this. If you enjoy his nature documentaries and you like non-fiction, this is a no-brainer. I really, really enjoyed it. I am so excited to read more from David Attenborough in the future. Then The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. I do have a negative for this one, unfortunately, and that is the way that the women think of themselves. So the two main female characters within this book have like early 2000s vibes about their bodies, like, oh, I can't eat those carbs, it'll go to my stomach. Separate from that, I don't want to get into it, I don't want to give it much time, but like, that happens. Separate to that, I enjoyed this book. So, this is a world where books hold magical powers, and if you physically hold and possess the book, you can use that power. And the titular book is the one that our main characters have. You can open a door, and if you visualise it correctly, it will open to any door in the world, but not just in this time frame, you can also go back and forwards in time. There are other books that have other types of magic, and some bad people have them, some good people have them, and it's all about trying to stop people from being murdered, to stop all sorts of events like that. I really enjoyed the way that they played with time travel. Of course, time travel is never perfect, there's always something wrong with it, but I really enjoyed the way that they played with it in here. I thought it was really well done, and I flew through this. So this was a 4? Oh, it was a 4.5 rating for me. So definitely still enjoyed it, despite the early 2000s body shaming. But it's a really fun book. It's not a favourite, but it's definitely a good time, and I'm glad that I read it. I read this one via audiobook actually, even though I do have this gorgeous Goldsboro edition, so I recommend the audio if you are interested. Another 5-star, and that is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. My first Jemisin. I've been wanting to read 5th season for forever, and I just don't own it, so I haven't been able to. I need to get it out of the library, but the last time I was in the library they had books 2 and 3, but not book 1. This is about when a city gets big enough it comes to life and has personification, and this is happening to New York, but New York is so big and has so many boroughs that each of the boroughs inhabits a person, as well as New York inhabiting a person overall. And there is an entity from another world that does not want New York to exist. They're trying to kill the cities before they're able to fully become themselves. And this is all about trying to actually become New York and to stop this enemy. It is the first book in a trilogy, which I did not know going in. I knew there was a second book, I didn't realise it was a trilogy. I am very excited for the rest of the books in this series. I think it is done fantastically. There is so much naturally interwoven representation in this book, and it just flows perfectly, especially with it being set in New York. Obviously that is such a cultural hub that everything just makes total sense. It is so engrossing. I loved it. Even though I do have the physical copy, I did end up listening to this via audiobook, and it was supposed to just be so I could get through a little bit of it while I was at work, but the audiobook is so well done. It is just one person narrating it, but there are sound effects and they go ham with the accents. It is fantastic. If you are at all interested in this book, I highly recommend the audiobook. It is done amazingly. Like, I want the copies of book 2 and book 3, but I will be listening to them via audio if it is done by the same person, because I need more audiobooks from them. It was fantastic, and it really immersed me in it. I quite often find audiobooks less immersive for me than reading physically, which is why I can struggle to pick my next audiobook, because I don't want to pick a book that I'm like really gonna love because I won't feel as invested. No problem with this one. Oh my god, it was amazing. Name of narrator here, because I don't know it off the top of my head and I need to read more audiobooks by them. This, it's just so good. So yeah, this is my favourite book of the month. Like, it's so good. I'm describing it badly. You should all know this from me by now. Next book, Elusive by Genevieve Cogman. This is the second book in the Scarlet Pimpernel series, and I was sent this for free by the wonderful people over at Tor. Thank you so much. Now, this is a great time. I read Scarlet only a few months ago and was really excited to dive into this one, and we get so much development. So this is a world where vampires are real, and it's happening at the time of the French Revolution, and that mix is wild. Our main character is a servant girl who originally starts off in a vampiric household, and that is why she's then taken on to join this secret society, because she already knows how to interact with vampires. And she also looks suspiciously like Marie Antoinette, even though she isn't her. And so she's used by this spy society to try and get upper class people out of France before they're beheaded. There is so much discussion in this about class and privilege, about murder, about manipulation of society and of what is supposed to be a democratic country and a democratic ruling, and then also the discussions of how even when they try and even when they genuinely care, the upper class in this time period had no idea of what it was like to be working class and to live in the realities of that life. This discusses all of that whilst also having vampires, magic, French Revolution, and a romance. Like, I'm having a good time with this. Also, the romance is like super slow burn. Like, they both know they like each other, but one is rich and one is poor. And so it's like, oh no, we can't actually be together because it's scandalous. I'm having a fantastic time with this trilogy. I'm really excited for book 3 to come out, which genuinely, if you told me at the start of the year that I would be loving a vampiric French Revolution historical fiction, no. And yet here I am. Then, The History of the World in Bite-Sized Chunks by Emma Marriott. I picked this up because I was recommending some books to Ali. I will have her channel linked down below. And I recommended this one. I was like, oh, I've not read it yet, but I think this is one that would work. She was wanting to do more like general global history. This one should work. And then I'd mentioned it and I'd finished my TBR and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to pick it up. It does work, Ellie. Now I've read it. Yes. This is exactly what it says. Very small chunks of history from, let me find out where it starts, 3500 BC and finishes in 1945 AD. And it is just small chunks from every single area of the world. I was really worried that, like, because this is written by a white woman, I was like, it's gonna be like focusing on like North America and Europe and maybe Asia. It focuses on every area that we have information on. The sections of time and the locations where I did know more about what was happening were really enlightening to me, because it meant that I could see I could see more what she'd taken out of areas that I didn't know about. Because obviously things are missing. This is bite-sized chunks. Things are missing. That is the whole thing of it. But it is a really great launch pad for you to then, if there's a specific area you're interested in, you can then go and research it. Or if someone then brings it up in conversation, or you need to learn about it for some reason, or if you're reading a book set in that era, you have more of a foundation. It's literally like a paragraph for each time period in each continent. And you've got like a paragraph or a few pages to set you up for understanding more what is happening in that time period, in that location. So I do think that this is a fantastic like base building book, and yeah, I really recommend it. I think it's done really well. Then gifted to me by Becca from the Book Sanctum, and that is Rotante by Jordan Ifueko. I did this a mixture of physically reading and audiobooking it because I listened to the last like 100 pages on the plane when I was flying out to Sweden. I did give it a 4-star. I was also disappointed. I think this should have been a trilogy, not a duology. There was too much that was tried to squeeze into this book. Ifueko tried to put too much character development and world development and plot development into this number of pages. Like, one of the points is that one of our characters is supposed to get to know and be beloved by this group of people, and I feel like we did not get enough time of that showing. She goes on an adventure to a location and we did not get enough time in that location. I feel like that should have been more fleshed out, and I really do think that this would have benefited from being a trilogy and not being just a duology. I did still love it, I did still give it 4 stars, but I wanted another one that I read on a plane related to Sweden, but this guy I'm going the other way, and that is Nowhere on Earth by Nick Lake. This was gifted to me by Renee from Renee Reads, so thank you so much. I blasted through this. If the flight had been 20 minutes longer, I would have finished it. As it was, didn't finish it in one sitting. Instead, I read to about here, and then had to disembark and get my luggage and get on the train to then go from Heathrow to York. And once I was on the train to York, then I finished off the rest of the book. This I ended up giving a 3.5 star. It is incredibly readable. It is YA, so that's probably part of the reason why it was slightly low, because I want a little bit more complexity from my books than I tend to get out of YA. This also could be part of why this was rated a little lower. We discover what's actually going on very slowly through this book. So we follow a young girl and her little brother who have snuck onto like a cargo aeroplane leaving Alaska, and the plane crashes and they're in the wilderness in the snow and they have to try and survive, and with this pilot who then discovers that they snuck on board of his plane. But why are they on the plane? Where are they going? Who is her little brother really? And what's happening with her life is a whole thing. This is a sci-fi novel, and it's just done really well. As an adult reading from this teenage girl's point of view, I really enjoyed kind of seeing her being really pissed off with her parents and occasionally annoyed at her little brother, but also loving them all dearly, and how that actually played out in a really realistic way. I think Nick Lake did that great. And it's a very interesting story, and I wish I'd read it when I was 16 because I think it would have been one of my favourites. But yeah, I had a fantastic time with this. Like I said, blasted through it. Would have been a one-sitting read if I hadn't had to get off of an aeroplane. How rude. Then I got the flu, and so I did another audiobook despite owning the book because I couldn't really see or concentrate on reading, and that is The Hawkling by Rebecca Zahabi. This is the second book in the trilogy. The first one is The Collarbound, and I loved this so much more than The Collarbound. The world building is so much more well done, more fleshed out. I actually felt invested in the world, whereas in Collarbound I felt a little bit distant and like we weren't actually getting told things. However, It makes more sense in this one now. The way that Zahabi has then brought in the additional world building actually now makes sense. So if you read the first book and you thought it was okay and you're curious but you don't know if you'll continue, I highly recommend picking this up. This is better than the first book. I really enjoyed it. The magic is explained further and we get magical mind battles that I really enjoy, as well as discussion on colonialism and on racism, and it's just, I really enjoyed it. And I have the third book, which I just scratched getting out. Well done. There we go. I have the third book here, and I almost picked it up straight away, but I remembered that I shouldn't do that because I review books on the internet, and when I read a series back to back, I 100% completely forget where one book stops and another book starts. Like, completely. I can't do it. So, I didn't end up reading the the third book straight after, but I loved this so much. It is absolutely fantastic. And then when I could read with my eyeballs, I read Spirits Abroad by Zen Cho. This is another one that was very gracefully sent to me by the wonderful folks over at Tor. I adored this so much. So I read Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. I was supposed to buddy read it with Hannah from Ladder M. She was unable to continue the buddy read at the same speed, and it was so addictive that I couldn't put it down, and I was a complete and utter bitch and just read it. I still feel guilty about it to this day, but I couldn't stop. It was really good. So, this is my second book from her, and it's a collection of short stories with Southeast Asian and Malaysian folklore mythology tales. Done so well. The representation in here is interwoven so naturally. Similarly, when I said to The City We Became, it just is naturally in here. There's no big deal made out of it, it's just a fact, and it's woven in so beautifully. I loved learning more about the folklore and the mythology from this region, which is not something that I'm particularly familiar with, but she also does interweave Britishisms a little bit into it because she has spent quite a bit of time here in the UK. And so, at least for me personally, it did make it more understandable, and I was able to kind of grasp what was going on a little better than I would have otherwise. It did take a few stories for me to get into it. The writing is quite small in this edition, so that will have been part of it, because my sinuses were blocked, my eyes were leaking, so I couldn't see. So I was like old lady in this book, because I could not see what was going on. So that will have been part of it, and then also flu brain. But once I was into it, I was having a fantastic time. I was loving it. This was like the perfect curl up in bed and read. And some of the stories, these are mostly standalone. They can all be standalone stories, but some of them have characters that link to some of the other stories in here, and I adored those because it felt like an extension of the world. It's just, these are done beautifully. Zen Cho needs one more book to become like one of my favourite authors. I ended up giving this a 4.5 star. I have Sorcerer to the Crown. Is it there? Yes, it is. Perfect. I have Sorcerer to the Crown by Zen Cho right here. My uncle sent me this years ago, and for some reason I've still not read it. I am now convinced I'm going to love it. I am vaguely concerned because both of the things I've read from her so far have been Malaysian folklore inspired, and Sorcerer to the Crown is very much more a traditional fantasy book. So I'm not sure how much that's going to be in it and how much that's going to alter my enjoyment, but I'm very excited to find out. I adored this book so much. I promise that this is my own, like, these are my own thoughts. You will see that next month. I have not had a good time with one of the other books I was sent by Tor, unfortunately. But yes, I love Zen Cho so much. This was absolutely fantastic. I'm surprised that it only got a 4.5. I think it's because it's a short story collection. And, you know, there's always one or two that you're not keen on, and it does bring it down. But if you've not read any Zen Cho yet, you need to pick her up. She's fantastic. And then I read one more book. I read this on my Kindle, and that is The Lantern of Lost Memories by Senaka Hirogi. It's on screen. I was sent an email by Picador through Pam Macmillan saying, because you loved Before the Coffee Gets Cold when you read it as a NetGalley arc years ago, we think you'll like this one. We've just given you auto access to it. And I was like, okay. It's like 240 pages. Let's pick it up. I read it in one day. I read it in one sitting. It was really good. I ended up giving it a 4.5. I didn't love it as much as I loved Before the Coffee Gets Cold. That one made me cry. This one did not. This one just had me a little emotional at the end. But what happens is that these people pass away, and before they reach the afterlife they go to this photo studio. And there are many different ones, and we follow one photo studio with one man who is running it. And they go there and they are given a huge stack of photos from every day in their life, one from each day, and they have to pick one photo for each year they were alive. So the older they are, the more photos they have to choose. And we follow this man when he has 3 different people in his studio. One is an old lady, one is a middle-aged, like 40-year-old Yakuza man, and the other is a young girl, I would guess around 10 years old. And they all have very different circumstances, they've all ended up there in very different ways, and you also get to learn a little bit more about the lantern process and this afterlife process. I adored this so much. It's so fantastic. It's another one of those translated Japanese fictions which is all talking about making life worthwhile, living to your fullest, enjoying life while you can, and enjoying those moments. And apparently that is something that I really enjoy, because Before the Coffee Gets Cold is very much along those similar lines of making the most of what you have and communicating clearly with people and enjoying life as it is presented to you. And it's just so joyful and so peaceful. It's so well written, and it's similarly to Before the Coffee Gets Cold, it is kind of episodic in that manner where you have different people but there are some continuous through lines, and I just really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. I will be getting a physical copy of that for my shelves because I want to reread it at some point. I think it was a fantastic little read. And not including the comics because they're over there. These are, is it even in shot? I think so. These are all of the books, all 14 books that I read in May. So yes, that is just a different book that I've shoved on top because I don't have a copy of the lanterns. Oh no. So I had a great time in May. Like I said, I do have a favourite book of the month, and that is The City We Became, which is down here. This is absolutely fantastic, and I'm so glad that I finally got a 5-star in Discworld. I was wondering when it was going to happen, so these are my 2 5 stars for the month. I had a great time. Let me know if you read any 5-star reads in May, because I haven't had any in March, I don't think. Anyway, let me know if you had any 5-star reads in May, or if you've read any of these. I would love to know what your thoughts are down below. If you want to see what I'm going to be reading in June, you can check that out up here. And if you'd like to see how I get on with my June reads, then please do hit subscribe down below. Hit dislike if you hated the video, and I will see you folks in the next one. Bye!